Previously on the diary.
As you already know, my twin sister tried to set me on fire after drugging my coffee at Starbucks. Today, I want to tell you about the video that Mr. Morgan saw before he died. Inside Mr. Morgan's basement, my twin sister squeezing a sponge over Mr. Morgan's mouth so he could have a little bit of water that he had to suck through the gag. They're saying he starved to death because there aren't any signs of torture besides him being bound to the chair. I really want to help the cops out. All I can tell them is that it wasn't me, that they should be looking for my sister that we all thought was dead, but I finally gave in to those words your dad wrote in his journal. The following day, I decided to give your sister up for adoption. I contacted an old college friend of mine who was a reporter to help me write a story where both your dad and you have died, thinking maybe this way, if she thought you were also dead, she would stop trying to kill you.
Before her boyfriend's murder, there were absolutely no rumors about my sister. I was trying to think what could have happened about a year ago that made her change like this. Well, about a year ago, I was let out of the psych ward, and that was on the news. Just noticing the time coincidence. 2 months after the death of her boyfriend, my sister was dating someone much older than her. I asked Dorothy if the older boyfriend had a unique shade of blue eyes, and of course it's Craig.
We can fast forward to her helping Rocco escape from prison, starving Mr. Morgan, setting my house on fire with me in it, and trying to murder Jessica.
According to Dorothy, my sister has a very strict, overprotective dad. Her whole family is just weird. She is her dad's most precious possession, and her mom could never get over the fact that she couldn't have children of her own. My sister invited a friend over for dinner, and her dad couldn't stand the sight of him. The entire time they were sitting at the dinner table, he kept mumbling and grunting in disapproval. The day after the dinner, her dad reprimanded my sister about her choice of friends and forbade her from hanging out with him ever again.
Diary, it seems like her dad must have picked her up after the park that day and technically locked her up at the top of the stairs, in the highest room, in the tallest tower, in the biggest castle, on the highest hill, in the most dangerous land in the whole wide world. My sister is literally wearing a shackle, chained to a sphere of high-grade iron, a literal ball and chain. What the curse is wrong with her dad?
My sister appeared at the top of the wooden fence, climbing over. When she came off the fence, I punched her in the face and knocked her out. I silenced her phone and texted the contact titled Dad to let him know where to find her, in hopes that she wakes up back in her house. At the end of the night, the police and local media arrived at the house. Everyone was accounted for, and Dorothy is giving us a ride in her car back to our town.
The following takes place on August 1st, 2015.
Dear Diary, today is Saturday, but this story started yesterday. In the 3 days I've been away, I've been very busy. I've been following my sister's dad around using Dorothy's car. Friday after work, he went to a bar by himself. I watched him drink a few glasses of hard liquor. When he was almost ready to leave, I casually walked into the bar. He looked at me with disbelief, but I waved at him and sat next to him. He was confused for 2 reasons, because he was under the impression that my sister was still chained to her bed at the house, which she was, and because if she had actually escaped, she would not just have walked over and sat next to him. They didn't know my sister had a twin at the time of adoption. They may have found out about me from the news of my trial or the school shooting, but they definitely know of my existence because my sister's arrest warrant is for attempting to murder her twin. So I had my sister's phone out, which I had already changed the unlock settings to work with my fingerprints, and inadvertently let him see me unlock it to induce the thought in him that I was my sister, and hopefully that would keep his mind from remembering the real me. He stayed silent, which scared me. But I wasn't going to let that break me off character. For all intents and purposes, today I am his daughter. I asked the bartender for the same drink he was having, and he ratted me out that I'm under 21. Then he grabbed my hand and pulled me towards the nearest exit. I was still unsure who he thought I was, so I started yelling that I didn't know him. He claimed he was my father, so I challenged it by saying he wasn't. He was convinced that I was his daughter. So I showed the security guard my ID, and then he showed his. And of course, our last names don't match. Mine says McConaughey, his says something else. He said I had a fake ID and asked to see it, but I didn't allow that and argued that if I was going to make a fake ID, I would have also changed my age so I could drink. The security guard decided to throw him out instead. I told them it was cool and unnecessary, and they let him stay so long as he would treat me with respect. He started asking what I was doing there, and I kept telling him I wouldn't answer his questions unless he bought me a drink. Of course that wasn't going to happen now that everyone knew my age, so I switched to, I will take all your questions, but for every answer you want, you must take a shot of tequila beforehand. It took a bit of convincing, but he agreed. I forced him to count the number of questions he had and buy the same number of shots ahead of time, so he purchased 5 shots. Question 1. How did I get out of the house? Shot. Mom let me out. Interestingly, that didn't surprise him much, even though she hasn't done anything to help my sister so far. Question 2. Why did I leave the house in the first place? He meant when my sister disappeared the first time after the school shooting, but before Pukey Face. Shot. I met someone, a cab driver in his early 30s, and I knew you wouldn't approve. Question 3. Would I come back to live with them voluntarily? Shot. Yes, that's why I'm here, to make peace. No more ball and chain. Question 4. Do I still love him? Shot. Yes, very much. I have missed you every day that I've been away, but it's about time you started treating me like an adult, which is what I was when I left. Question 5. Am I still together with the cab driver? Shot. No, but he wants me back and won't leave me alone. He's getting aggressive and dangerous. He was the one who punched me and knocked me out last week after I texted you to come find me around the block. At this point, he stared at the black eye makeup Dorothy put on me, made me question if we did it on the right eye. He said he had more questions, but I reminded him every answer cost 1 shot of tequila. Question 6. Do I need his help to get rid of the cab driver? Shot. Yes. Question 7. Where could he find this Craig? Shot. I gave him the address to the Fight Club house. Useless now, they've all been arrested. There was plenty of evidence there to put them away for a long time for all the crimes they committed and all the plans they had for future crimes. But he doesn't know that. At this point, he was already pretty drunk, so I told him I would drive him home and he didn't have to drink anymore. I would answer any questions on the way home. I had a good time with him. It was an amazing feeling to lie to him about every single thing, giving him a false sense of security by telling him only what he wanted to hear and appealing to his protective father figure until we got home. I actually drove around for a while, so by the time we got there, her dad had thrown up and passed out in the car. I took his keys and walked in the house. It was past midnight, and the mom was already asleep. I found my sister in her room, still chained to her bed, catching some Z's. I gave her a quick chokehold, and even though she woke up, she couldn't really get away and inevitably went back to dreamland. I had the keys to unchain her, and I carried her out to the trunk of her dad's car. I still had some rope, so I tied her up and taped her mouth shut before locking her up. Then I sort of woke her dad up and crutched him into the living room. I brought his laptop from the car and opened it. I made him unlock the computer and then let him black out on the couch again. I took pictures of him at the computer as if he were the one using it, all by himself. And then I used every single debit and credit card I could find in his wallet and bedroom to bet all his money away in online poker games. It took all night, but it was worth it. I posted pictures all over his social media, which logged in automatically on his computer, just so there wouldn't be any doubt that it was really him. I gave them statuses like, "Ah, lost again," or "I'm on a roll." When the debit card maxed out the funds in the checking account, it overdrafted to the savings accounts. I know because he was getting push notifications from his bank's app on his phone, which I agreed to after using his limp fingers to unlock his phone. All his life savings are gone. All his credit cards are maxed out to the top, completely bankrupt. And it's totally legal. Can't even claim it wasn't him because there's just too much evidence against him. And sure, he may or may not still have some secret bank account that I couldn't get to and I didn't touch his wife's accounts, who, by the way, did not wake up while I was in their bedroom, but I was not done with him. I then dragged him back to his car. My sister was already awake in the trunk, kicking and screaming in the garage, but nobody could really hear her. I then drove them to a nearby park. I rolled the man to the children's sandbox. I left him there with his pants and underwear pulled down to his ankles. I then nailed a tree branch in the sand right next to his waistline with a paper sign stuck to it that read, "Play my flute." I then slipped a Viagra pill into his mouth and drove away. Unfortunately for him, I didn't even have to buy the pills. He already had them. In a few hours, when he wakes up to the sound of screaming children and to the death stare of angry mothers, the world will be completely different for him. Welcome to Sex Offender Life, where getting a job is practically impossible, and no other person on this planet trusts you or wants anything to do with you. My sister took our house in a fire. I'm taking away her dad's ability to keep his, and he'll think my sister is responsible for it. Now, before I left the house with the two of them, I left a gift for the mom that I worked on yesterday. Did you know that apple seeds contain a small amount of cyanide? I did. Of course, it isn't a lethal amount by any means, but if you buy about 20 apples or more to make muffins, you can crush around 200 apple seeds into a perfectly lethal dose that can be used to powder one of the apple muffins. And then just leave them out in the kitchen for her to find with a note from her daughter, and you have yourself an apple cyanide muffin Russian roulette party. The dad was a big piece of garbage, controlling and possessive, so he sort of deserves his punishment. The mom was just simply too passive. So there's 8 muffins, and only one of them is poisoned. She might eat it herself. She might pass it on to a neighbor or friend. She might feed it to the dad. My sister killed Mr. Morgan just to punish me, and he was completely innocent. That's why her mom is playing this game. If she eats it herself, there is no true love's first kiss to wake up from this curse. If she gives it to someone else, she'll definitely know that the muffin she gave them was the cause of death. And that will haunt her forever. If she ends up throwing it in the trash and nobody eats it, then she would have averted her punishment. May the odds be ever in her favor. Hate C.